everyone. It's Tommy Lee Hayes Brown with Rito Recognition. I am so excited today for today's webinar. We are going to be talking to Caira Benson. She is first and foremost my friend. We met a short time ago where she was the speaker at the conference board, and we hit it off immediately. My boss, Jennifer Lumbo, myself, and the entire conference audience were floored by Caira and her presentation, many of us to the point of tears, after hearing her speak about her and her husband Eric's challenges during the aftermath of his military service. But more importantly, I was inspired. Inspired by the fact that Caira was standing before me looking so calm and collected. If I had to handle half of what she had been through, I probably would have folded a long time ago, let alone compose myself enough to speak to and inspire a room full of strangers. It made me immediately count my blessings and apologize for saying things to my wife like I had had a hard day the night before, which, you know, after hearing Caira speak made me realize that I really haven't had many bad days at all. You know, my usual complaints about my usual mishaps paled in comparison to what Caira and Eric have been through. She's always very quick to minimize her trials, and maybe that's what comes after you've gone through as much as she's gone through. You learn to count each day as a gift. You begin to become more thankful for the ordinary pleasures in life. You begin to appreciate and recognize the beauty and the seemingly, or what you used to may have thought as mundane. That's what Caira has done for me, and I'm sure that's what she's gonna do for you, if you're smart enough to listen. So without further hesitation, I wanna introduce to you my friend, Caira Benson. Hey, Caira.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. I don't recognize myself after that intro.
Well, I tried to, I mean, you have a long bio and a lot of accomplishments, but I really wanted our viewing audience to understand why we wanted you here today. We're a recognition company. And some people might say, well, why are you having this woman come and talk about, you know, her trials and tribulations of life and her joys and her pains and, you know, the military connection. But I think your story is one, no matter what your background is, it's something that we can all relate to. And if we can't relate to it, we are definitely able to draw inspiration from it. So I just really wanted to thank you for joining us with me, because you've got a very, very busy schedule. So we appreciate you carving out a little bit of time for us. And we're just going to let this interview flow. Honestly, honest Scout's honor, we have not, you know, prepared much in the way of questions, because I think Caira does best when we're talking. So many times we've talked since we've met personally, and I'm like, God, I wish I was recording this. Oh, I wish I got to say this. Everybody's got it in. I'm writing down notes because just it's her norm, ladies and gentlemen, to inspire, and she's not a victim. She's not a victim at all. So let's start at the beginning. So how did you and Eric meet?
So we were introduced, I lived in Georgia at the time. He lived out and he was stationed in Texas. We were introduced by someone who knew us both. Mm-hmm. And we talked and emailed for, goodness, probably a while, maybe 2 or 3 months. And I flew out to Texas to meet him. And it was immediately, just like we had emailed and talked, we kind of hit it off. And flew out to Texas and then found out he was getting deployed. And so it was kind of the introduction to my brother's in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
My grandfather and my uncle had also been service. So not a newbie, but it was a total difference to step into it as a wife. And so he deployed, and we were crazy enough to get married on R&R. So go ahead, ask me about the wedding, because literally he was calling me from Kuwait saying, I don't know if I'm going to make it or not.
Oh, Lord.
He landed in Atlanta probably 24 hours, maybe 36 before the wedding. So it's just, you know, as we joke, welcome to the government messing up your plans.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So that's how we met. We kicked it off, and we spent a lot of time before we deployed back and forth. One of us was either in Texas or Georgia every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then he deployed, and we kept talking. We decided to get married on his R&R. We ran away to the mountains and said, we're going. You can have, it's us and God, and you can have 10 people. So if you want to come, come. And that's what we did. And then he went back and finished up tour, and I finished up my MA, and my eldest and we moved to Texas, and we're there when he got back.
Nice. So he's been on tour a few times?
Twice. So he spent over 2 years in Iraq.
Okay.
So he was in OIF, or Operation Iraqi Freedom. He deployed at the very beginning in 2003, and he deployed again from 2005 to 2006. So kind of sometimes what we call the Wild West days, when there were, if you remember back then, they were throwing their armor down in the bottoms of the Humvees, and we were buying, private armor for him. He deployed with a sidearm, or what we would call a 9mm and 6 bullets. He spent 2 months at war, and that's all he had. So definitely a different experience than later. But so he was there in the very beginning, and during the surge.
Okay. All right. And so that's a total of about how many years?
So just over 2 deployed.
Just over 2. Okay.
And then he came back, and we had this very small section to get out, because they had about 2 months before they were redeploying for another 15 months.
Okay.
So again, back in the surge, where pretty much if you could deploy, you were over between 12 and 15 months, at least with the Army. Marine Corps was always a little bit shorter, but he was in the Army. So.
Oh, okay. And then, so tell me what happened. So, well, let's go to children next. Tell me about the rest of your family.
All right, so we have 5 kids. We have a 16-year-old and
five kids?
5. So they go from 16 to just turned 5 last week.
Wow. Happy birthday.
Yeah, the little one. You remember the artist who was running around?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But we have a 16, 12, 10, 8, and 5. And then one of our children is disabled, and 2 of them are special needs.
Okay.
So I don't think a lot of people realize that the special needs community for the guys or the ladies who deployed into the theaters in OIF, OEF is about 13%, which doesn't sound 13? Like a lot. 13.
1-3. Okay.
1-3, which is almost, I think in general population, it's around 3 to 6.
Okay. So I'm sharing now a picture of your family.
Yes.
Minus 1 kid. And
yes.
So why don't you tell? It's the Disney picture. Do you remember who's on there?
So this is our Ryder, who's the boy. That's the 12. The one all the way to the right. That's Aislinn. She's 10.
Okay.
And then that's the now 5-year-old in his lap.
Nice.
The 8-year-old.
Nice. Okay, great. Just so we have a frame of reference, such a beautiful family. And so I guess then my next question is, so what happened? What happened with Eric and his health?
Yeah, so we don't have that typical, a lot of people think about an injury in the military and they think, oh, you got blown up, you went to Walter Reed, you got medevaced out. We don't have that typical experience. My husband did ROTC too, so ROTC, and during then there's active training. So he was doing airborne course, and he did some other active schools between 2000 and 2003. And that's where his first injury happened, is his parachute malfunctioned in 2000. So it opened but didn't stay open. It was a high winds jump, and the chute collapsed, and he woke up kind of drugged down a ravine. So it was kind of his first experience. He kept going because that's just the kind of person he is, and did his officer's course, went straight into deployment. And during deployment, he was a combat engineer, so a lot of explosives. But one of the ones that they've pulled out is 2 Land Rovers packed with explosives blew up a police station, and he was right outside. He was halfway in a 113, which is a big armored vehicle, but the officer kind of hangs out the top. And pretty much everything in front of him didn't make it. I don't know how to, we joke he was 5 seconds too late, in a good way. And so they've pulled that one out as a major experience for him because he doesn't remember so much after it. But again, back to those Wild West days, if you were walking, talking, and didn't lose a limb, you pretty much got shipped right back in.
Wow. And
there was no concussion screens. Nobody knew really about TBI. There weren't TBI screens or traumatic brain injury.
Thank you.
No one was looking for that, really, unless you lost a limb. And even the guys who lost limbs, I know several who they didn't get screened for traumatic brain injury. They just got screened for, the amputation. So we just didn't know as much back then. So there were a few more major blast exposures. One, he lost his hearing for 2 weeks. He came back home. I met him. We got married. I moved back out there during his deployment. And then he came back with a lot of different exposures there too. Also blast exposures, but a lot of chemical exposures. So in his second tour, he helped do a lot of the rebuilding. So he was in some power plants and some other things. And it's hard to explain to someone who lives in America what it looks like over there when they walk by, empty gas canisters on the floor that are not, the mustard gas and things like that. They're not the kind you want to be walking by. There's no sewage systems. You're walking through open sewage in the fields. It's really hard to explain that. And just everything that they went through, we had some more concussive exposures there, but also a lot of chemical exposures. And by the time he got home, by the time he got home for the first tour, he couldn't feel his legs when he ran. And he was starting to forget things, but he was still good enough to deploy again. And by the time he got home the second time, the numbness and just that forgetfulness and constant headaches had increased, and we didn't know what it was. Again, not a lot of people knew. They told us it was all kind of in his head, or they blamed it all on a hip and a back injury from that parachute landing.
Okay.
And so it really he was not diagnosed until 2018. And then in 2018, he was firmly diagnosed with traumatic brain injury and what they're calling toxic encephalopathic process from chemical exposure. So what that's done is it's kind of really hurt his whole operating system. A lot of, when you injure the brain at that capacity, nerve damage, headaches, not able to sleep, sleep apnea, all of that can come from that brain damage. And the brain's a really interesting thing. It tries to rebuild neurons. It tries to put things back together. But after so long, it can't keep doing that. And so what we're starting to see is things that are more central being impacted, like gut and heart rate and blood pressure. And so we keep moving on. But he's now.
So is this injury? Tell me what it is again. Is it
traumatic brain injury? So.
And then you mentioned something else.
So yeah, toxic encephalopathic process.
Okay.
People also call it what they call acquired brain injury. So it's a chemical brain injury.
Okay. All right. And then, so how does that manifest itself? Is it something that just, one day he woke up and he was like this? Is something gradual? Will he heal from it? What's the diagnosis? So with the traditional TBI, that concussion, there's a process that, yes, the brain can actually help itself. And you kind of know what you have after it. So a lot of that numbness in the legs and all that he was feeling back then, that was kind of that initial phase. What they're telling me is about 10 years out, we have a lot of people that either plateau or sink, and they're not sure why they sink. They just step down.
when we figured out that there was this chemical issue, or the TEP on top of it, that makes a lot more sense. That is much more of what they call a neurodegeneration. So it's not a simple, there it goes and we're done. This is something that they don't know how to stop. They don't know that they can stop, and they just tell us to, it's going to get worse. We can do some things to slow it down, but that's about it. So
it's going to get worse. What does that mean?
Yeah. So right now, well, let me put this in perspective. When he couldn't, he had qualifiers because he couldn't do all the physical stuff anymore after he got hurt. 2 years ago, he went into a wheelchair about 95% of the time. Because
slowly but surely the nerves or what have you have started failing, and then so eventually he can't walk as long as he could have.
Right. So what we call small fibers, so those all those superficial nerves, those kind of go first. It's starting to impact his coordination and large fibers. So like he'll tell his leg to move and it won't move. He'll tell his arms to close, or his arms to move or his hands to close, and that won't happen all the time now. It's,
and so you say he tells them to, where you and I just kind of go through life and we pick up things, or we walk, or we move, but Eric has to consciously make an effort. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. To pick up that piece of paper or to walk over there. And you're saying now he's even lost the ability to do that.
Right. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's not a lot of, if I can equate it to something on the civilian side, CTE and NFL players, which has gotten a lot of exposure. Where the brain cells eventually start to die off. That's kind of, when you talk about where it's going, that's kind of where we're headed.
Okay.
But so he can't walk. He has syncope now too. So smells or any lights, anything that overloads the system will make him pass out because his brain can't handle overstimulation. He's losing the ability to process sounds. So it's interesting because it's not that traditional TBI where you get hit and then you plateau. It's this something behind it. And, they're still looking for like possible MS. They're still looking for, some other possible neurodegeneration. But right now what we know is this is what we have. And, we keep going. So you enjoy the days you have, and we don't think too much about where it's going.
Okay.
So, but you do get told the speech of, if there's something you want to do, go do it now.
Right, because you've even seen it in the time you've been dealing, with him. I mean, since the injury, you've just seen the constant degeneration. I'm assuming. So.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, okay. Well, that gives us a really good, foundation to talk about. Then how do you get through your days? Because that is, if I can be blunt, a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot for anybody. I don't care who you are. That is a lot to deal with. And what so impressed Jennifer and I when we saw you was just how cool and composed you were. What really impressed me? I don't think I've ever told you this. What really impresses me is people's children. And your children were spot on. I mean, your children were very well behaved, very mannerful. And I know it's not always the case 100% that a child is a reflective of their parent, but in my mind, most of the time that is the case. And dealing with everything that you're dealing with, and then still having well-behaved, mannerful children who were very well-spoken and followed directions. I'm a big, big supporter of homeschool. And I know you've had to homeschool.
Yes.
By choice or necessity?
It's mainly by necessity. We do it by choice now. We started, and I don't think a lot of people get this either. So when you're in the veterans medical system, a doctor's appointment is not a doctor's appointment. When we were in Wisconsin, all the specialty had to be seen in Minnesota. So it was 2 hours to 2.5 hours one way. So anything pretty much beyond like primary care and flu shots. And as you can imagine, we have a lot of specialty clinics. Because, one of the things this impacts too is executive function, memory, and even it's getting to the point now where if his brain gets overloaded, he'll slur speech and can't read anymore. And so there's a lot that goes on that you have therapies, but those are all 2.5 hours away or wherever your main center is. And so here I am. And when we started with the VA, I had 3 kids, and so you're sitting there and you've got 3 kids and there is no physical way to drive 2.5 hours and then go through, let's say you have 4 appointments, and at the VA, they're not 30 minutes. They're always running behind. You may get in on time. So your average day at a VA hospital is 8 to 10 hours.
Okay.
And then you have another 2.5 hours home if you don't hit traffic. So as you can imagine, there's no way to drop a child off at before school care, have the child go to school, and even with after school care, get back before you can pick them up. And so there are quite a few of us in this boat who have decided that it is just better. We got tired of truancy letters. And so for us, it did start by, we didn't have another option. And then we decided it really worked well. So we love it now, and we probably have no intent to change. And even my high schooler's like, no, Mom, I'm staying home. Right. So we love it as a family now, but it's definitely, we didn't start by choice. We started kicking and screaming actually a little bit. It's like, I don't want to take this on too. Right. But it's
because you have the opportunity. I mean, when they're in a traditional school, I mean, it's kind of like, you have some daycare to help you get those doctor's appointments because they take all day, yes. And that's definitely something I never thought about. You're saying, well, a doctor's appointment is an hour or 2 at the most. But, you're talking about travel time. You're talking about taking pretty much your whole day.
Yes.
And that's something that as a caregiver of someone with the issues with the magnitude of Eric's that, I've just never, thankfully I've never thought about, but I think people need to be more sensitive about, because that is a big, big issue, where you've had to change the structure of who you are as a family in order to accommodate getting dad to his appointments.
Yes. Oh yeah, it completely changes the structure, and even the kids, understand. We joke that the middle child, the 10-year-old now, our first VA appointment, she was in a sling because they wouldn't allow strollers in the hospital. So I had a sling, I put her on the front, and I was like, carrying the 2, holding hands with the other 2. You don't think about things like that. And even now, and when he was working, he ran into problems all the time because they're like, well, what do you mean it takes 8 hours for you to go to a doctor's appointment?
Right. And in the regular space of what, probably the average person is used to, that just sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
And not only is it 8 hours, but it's probably a few times a month.
Yes. It is. It sounds utterly ridiculous, and it's not. They're better a little bit about it now, but still, that was way back before we could send into the community. So they're a little bit better now because you can get things a little bit closer to home.
Okay.
But even the first choice program, we didn't qualify for it because that family care clinic, the primary care, was within 15 miles. So that was how the law was written. So, which is why they went to the new Mission Act. But we didn't qualify for it all. So we still had to go for anything more than, primary checkup and a flu shot is kind of what we joked. So they are a little bit better. They're a little bit more sensitive. They're putting a few more specialties out in the community-based clinics, or they're referring a lot more out now. So.
Good. Well, let's talk about caregiving.
Okay.
So, one thing that was really impressive is you're an Elizabeth Dole Caregiver Fellow or Fellow Caregiver? Which is it? Yeah.
Elizabeth Dole Fellow. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about the Elizabeth Dole Fellow, and then we can kind of transition to, caregiving, because I've, prior to meeting you and hearing your story, I just thought about caregiving as far as maybe an elderly parent. I've never thought, and, shame on me. I just never, came into I don't have a lot of friends who are in the military. I don't come from a military background, so it just wasn't a part of, I guess, who I was. So, prior to meeting you, I appreciate you, Caira, so much, because it has opened my eyes to, what our brothers and sisters in the military that fight so hard to defend our countries, and then the war is not over when they come home. I guess that's the best way to put it, is that they're still at war with themselves, war with their health, their bodies, war with the system. So I guess that's a long way of saying, tell us about the Elizabeth Dole Fellow, what that means. And then if you could tell us, your thoughts about caregiving.
Sure. I like to say that the war hasn't stopped for our men. It's just changed battles when they go. And so what does an Elizabeth Dole Fellow do? I am quite honored to be a fellow. So the Elizabeth Dole Foundation steps up, supports caregivers of any era of military, specifically veteran. And really it grew from, as you know, Senator Bob Dole was in the military. He was in Walter Reed. And Senator Elizabeth Dole was there with him, and she watched all the young caregivers there and was kind of stunned that they didn't have support systems, they weren't having transition systems. When I think Bob Dole was in for a year, perhaps. He was in for a long hospitalization, and that experience really grew out in her that our caregivers in the military were not getting supported. And I alluded to this a little bit in the speech when we met, was that when you're in the military, there's not when Eric was in, but now there's a Wounded Warrior Battalion, there's a Transition Battalion, there's family readiness groups, and those were back when I was in with him. There was all this support structure for the military, and all of a sudden your spouse is home and he's injured, and you have a little bit of that left, and then you're discharged, whether it be a medical retirement or a medical separation, or in our case, it was just a straight, they weren't doing med boards as much back then. And so ours was just a straight discharge. And so we have to go back for that now even. You have nothing. You have veteran status and, your disability rating if you have it. And all of a sudden you have a caregivee who might be able to work or might not be able to work. Eric did work initially, and then one day he couldn't work anymore. And even before that, I gave up my job to help support him because he could work, but he needed more support at home. And then all of a sudden you have full-time work, and you lose your full-time work, and everything that we think that goes with full-time work, employment benefits, retirement benefits, IRAs, 401ks, all of that's gone. We hit our first medical bump and we were thinking, it'll be okay. We cashed out the first IRA I had, you pay, he was in ICU, we paid the bills, the VA wouldn't pay for it. And so.
The VA wouldn't pay for it?
No. So in his life, we've had to pay for, he was in a coma for 10 days. The VA denied to pay that, even though he was at...
Because they didn't think it was... I don't understand the VA didn't pay. I don't understand that.
Because if you don't transfer to an immediate VA hospital, they will not foot the bill. And unfortunately, he was so unstable, they couldn't transfer him.
Okay.
And then they refused to purchase her first wheelchair as well, too. So we had an organization who helped us purchase that. We also had to pay for his first brain scan. So because we couldn't get them to approve, we couldn't get the VA to approve a brain scan. Once we had that brain scan, they were like, oh, we didn't know this was happening. And we got a lot more of the diagnoses. It's a lot of it's dependent upon which VISN you're in. And I'm really kind of digressing. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
It's a lot about which VISN you're in and how they handle things. But for the main part, it's a struggle to get what you need covered. And if you have an immediate hospitalization, they won't cover it until you transfer to the VA hospital. So we had no private insurance at that time. We had state insurance, and they helped cover a little bit of it, but we were still, I think we still owed like $27,000, and then you turn around and the things get crossed. He had a VA surgery and they didn't pay for the anesthesia. And you appeal things like that, and you're kind of stuck in the appellate process, and and by the time you're through appealing it, if they paid it, it's already on your credit report. I mean, there's a lot that you deal with behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So anyway, what the Elizabeth Dole did is she was listening to all these people at Walter Reed, and she said, look, this is not the support they need. We have people, and we have soldiers who have gone from some of the most elite, fighters we have to not being able to feed themselves. Wow. And all of a sudden, there's a soldier, and he had retirement, and he had a paycheck, and he had, base income housing, he had all of it. They had a future, and all of a sudden you don't. And there were no, and the wife has to quit her job. Like we talk, sometimes the kids are home with you too, because school is not an option. Right. Try balancing, 2 years inpatient at Walter Reed with a traditional school system. Everything is impacted. It's not just the veteran, it's the family. And so you give up your job, your kids often give up their school, you move, because as we talked, it's very dependent upon which VISN you're in. They're all very, very different. So you move to the care center he needs. I have a friend, he was severely wounded. He was in Reed for a little bit. He went to San Antonio. It took him 2 years to get back to San Diego. So, and they have 4 kids. And so in that whole time, they're traveling back and forth, or they're living in Fisher houses. It's everything. And then you finally get your warrior home, and all of a sudden you have no work. And now they're med boarding your husband out, or they're discharging, your spouse, not necessarily a husband. And all of a sudden income, and you're waiting on your VA ratings for your disability pay, because that's not immediate. You're waiting to see if you get military retirement, if you have healthcare insurance left. You only get that at a certain level. And at this point, in order to wait on terms, we have cashed out 401ks, we've applied for Medicaid. I mean, and so they were so upset about the lack of support that they started the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. And really what she does, or what the foundation does, is we work locally and nationally to make sure that the VA is supporting military caregivers of all eras, not just recent. I mean, even World War II, World War, Vietnam, Korea, all of that, that they have the supports they need, that legally they're not forgotten in laws that are being passed, and that the VA is keeping up their laws to ensure that we're part of a care team. I can't tell you how many times I've been kicked out of a hospital room because they didn't think I was relevant to care. And so we just started a whole campaign for inclusive care, including the caregiver, making sure that they're in, and there's a paid stipend program they're trying to roll out to earlier caregivees that is still being held up, with things not working right.
Right.
And not all of us are part of that. I'm not. So I'm the first to admit that. But I feel very unfocused. I'm sorry. You can edit that out.
Fine. You're fine.
But so at the national level, we work with Congress, and we work with the people who run the VA to make sure that the VA is not overlooking us as caregivers. On the local level, we make sure that local cities and governments are supporting us or have the resources we need. And we also, there's a Hidden Hero City initiative that kind of helps with that as well. Okay. And then we also work with local, what we call VMACs, which are VA hospitals. Like we have one here in Orlando or Jacksonville, Tampa, some of the bigger ones. And we work with them to make sure that the laws that are intended up in DC get ran the way they need to be ran.
Right.
So, and we also work one-on-one with a lot of caregivers to make sure that they know what they have access to, what resources they need. This COVID thing is a perfect example. There were a lot of us who needed Lysol wipes. I ran out of alcohol in the middle of it. We have shots we have to give with no alcohol prep pads. They were all off the shelves. We talk about Lysol and Clorox. I kind of laugh. Eric can only use 1 cent without passing out. So,
Wow.
even finding, the joys of syncope. Try not only finding Lysol wipes, but the one in the 1 cent you can use. um, and
Yet you
so,
laugh, and
yeah,
that's what I love about your spirit. You find the humor
hey,
in things that, most people would, you know, not laugh at, you know.
oh, well,
And who would have thought a certain scent you need so he doesn't pass out?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you have to have that scent,
yes. Yeah.
you
So
know.
one of the things I did was I was checking in with all the caregivers I know, what do you need? What do you have? I literally had alcohol wipes, shot prep sent to me from Texas because we
That is
all pitched.
awesome. That
But
is
that's
awesome.
and that's what I love about the brotherhood and the sisterhood that is the fellows is we're in constant contact with the caregivers on the ground. Do you need financial help? Do you need, you know, like for us, do you need help with adaptive housing? Do you need help putting in a bathroom? Do you need help? What do you need? And then we'll connect you with whatever resources we can. Or, like this caregiver, hey, I've got an extra 20. Will it see you through? Yes, please, send them on.
Hmm.
And that's what we do. So we're kind of annoying. We're all over the place. There's 2 per state. I'm sorry. There's 1 per state.
One what?
1 fellow.
One fellow per state.
One
Oh,
fellow per state.
okay.
Active 2 years. Some have more. Florida has more. California has more. And then after the 2 years, we have an alumni foundation. So if you want to
Okay.
continue active with the Dole Foundation, you become active as an alumni. So I'm in my 2nd year, and then I will very much stay active as a fellow because I really see the worth in what we do and the work we're doing.
Absolutely you will. I have no doubt about that. But I honestly, I didn't know they were so rare. So kudos to you, Caira. I mean, I'm sure there's an application list a mile long. Kudos to Elizabeth Dole,
Yeah.
for recognizing the caregiving aspect, which leads me to my next question about caregiving. It's, again, like I said, something that I've never really thought about that much, but that you've brought to my attention about caregiving. And, we consider ourselves caregivers on a whole separate level. We're an employee recognition company, and we care about employees. We show managers how to care about their employees, how to make sure that they feel valued and appreciated, so that they, work harder for you, work better, work smarter, become more innovative, and reach your goals, help reach your goals through highly motivated employees. So that's what we do. For me, it sounds like there's an alignment there because you, as a caregiver, you're definitely making sure that, your sisters and brothers who are in the same boat as you, are heard, that that role is shown some love and some value and some appreciation, because it's really easy to say, okay, Eric's the war hero. He's the great guy. He's suffering all these physical challenges. But what about Caira? And I'm not equating one or another or saying one's higher than another. That's not the point I'm trying to make at all. The point I'm trying to say is that this whole idea and notion of caregiving is so important, because without the Cairas, there'd be no Eric.
Yeah.
So just like like any marriage, it takes 2, but one's highly depending on the other, and I would venture to say you're highly dependent on your husband as well. So you don't feel like you're at a disadvantage or you got the short end of the stick. I know you and your spirit. We've talked a lot, but that caregiving aspect, let's talk about that just a little bit and what that means to you. What does that look like? Okay, you've kind of given us a glimpse, but maybe talk about your housing situation. How it's like a little bit, the different access, adaptive housing, I think is what you've called it. That's something that we probably, the normal person, wouldn't think about.
Yeah. I joke quite often that it's all about keeping your sanity when the wheelchair van doesn't fit in the garage or any parking deck that you try to go to. Things you don't think about. So, Eric is wheelchair bound about 90% of the time to 95% of the time. And so things you don't think about when all of a sudden you need adaptive housing. The walker doesn't fit down the hallway. We had this beautiful 1950s home in Wisconsin, which is where we were for 9 years. Mm-hmm. Beautiful 1951, 3-story, loved it. Could not fit a walker down the hallway. And every wall is load bearing, so you can't move it. 3 steps to come into the back, 10 steps to come into the front. All the kids' bedrooms are upstairs. Yes, yeah. So we were very blessed in December to get into a quasi-adaptable house down here in Florida. So we call it wheelchair friendly. We're trying to get the bathroom redone, so we actually have a roll-in shower versus like a step-over tub.
Okay.
But things people don't think about. Our van, I have to lift the wheelchair in and out. We don't have a ramp. I drive this massive NV 3500, which is like 7 feet and 2 inches tall, because we got to fit the 5 kids in too, right?
Right,
You can't
right.
just have, the small little minivan. But things you don't think about. Not being able to reach the stoves, the knobs on the back of the stove without reaching over like hot burners. Having to get out of the doorway of a refrigerator trying to open when you're in a chair. It is definitely a fine line that you walk as a spouse and a caregiver. We have to find this line between still loving our spouse, no matter what, and letting him be who that spouse needs to be. Because I don't know many veterans who are wounded who aren't still that person who was so sure of themselves and so cognizant that they went and fought for our country, and they did all that they did, and that person's still there, even when their body doesn't pretend it is. So you balance that line between that and then making sure, in our case, it's making sure that the meds are done on time, making sure that he has help setting up, to brush his teeth, that if he needs help, bathing, dressing, any of that, that you do it with dignity. I love this house because it's given him the ability to move around. And he can actually go do things again. If he wants to, roll down the hallway and help the kids hang up clothes, he can. Because you lose part of that father role too. The kids are up 15 stairs. How do I go tuck them in at night?
Right.
So there's, we talk about the wife and the caregiver, or the spouse and the caregiver, but the kids also go through a lot too. They, 3 of them are old enough to be very cognizant that, 3 years ago, dad still went on hikes on it, and now he can't, or we have a hiking wheelchair, how do we work that in? We went to a retreat in Maine, which is a wonderful retreat run by the Travis Mills Foundation, who's Travis Mills, staff sergeant Travis Mills is a quad amputee. Eric used to be an avid mountain biker. They put him on a bike for the first time in 13 years. And I have this picture that makes me cry every time I see it, of the 10-year-old running beside him going, "Dad can ride a bike. Go, Dad, go, Dad." And you kind of store those up because as a family, the whole dynamic is hurt. And so I love the Travis Mills Foundation because they're so good at getting the guys up there and going, or the girls, whoever's wounded, they get them up there that no's not an option. I have watched them build and get guys to shoot archery that had missing an arm. They built a mouthpiece for them. No's not an option, and they can get paralyzed up on a high ropes course. It changes the whole dynamic of the family because you can get so stuck in the I can't, and you have to get out of that. At some point, in order to thrive, you have to be able, okay, fine, I can't, but what can I do?
Right.
And I think that is a balance as a caregiver, is you're doing, all right, fine, we can't go mountain bike out in Mount Zion like you used to. Let's figure it out. Oh, you know what? We can get a hand bike and we can at least go trail ride on flat trails here. Let's go work with it. We got a hiking wheelchair. Let's go hike. So but I think you're constantly creative and as a caregiver and trying to keep that person that you married alive and not letting them get stuck in that. I can't. So anyway.
And that's what is so inspiring to you, about you, is the fact that, well, maybe we can't do X, but we can do Y, and it may not be exactly the same, but this is the new X, for us and our family. And I love what you said about, I think your children are just going to, they may have lost some bit of what normalcy is to the normal family, but think of how much they're going to just gain from seeing, Eric and you and all the troubles that all the challenges that you've beat, and how it hasn't beat down your spirit. And I guess I want to close with this, Caira, and I believe we'll see you again in this form because we have so many. I didn't even ask for questions this time because I knew this conversation was going to require a lot of interaction and speaking between the two of us. Maybe next time, if you're out there, if you have questions for Caira, I'm going to show you how to submit them. And part 2 of our webinar, maybe later this summer, we'll get together, Caira, and do this again. So I wanted to close with, well, before I get to my closing question, what's the top 5 things the Benson family needs? And I'm talking about, just don't even go there with the whole spiritual and all that. What tangible things do you need?
You mean like tactile?
Something we can buy in a store. Something if somebody's watching this and says, alcohol swabs, or whatever. What do you need, especially in this time we're in the middle of this pandemic?
Lysol wipes and lemon scent.
Say it again?
Lysol wipes and lemon scent.
Lysol wipes and lemon scent. Okay. Is that like the pull up? The wipes you pull up to disinfect?
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
They have, and I can send you links. They have put Eric on a special diet that we have to order it in, and it's expensive. So I would take gift cards to it.
To that service? What's the name of the service? Or you'll give me the links and I can post it somewhere?
Yeah, the service is Splendid Spoon. He has to be on...
Splendid what?
Splendid Spoon.
Splendid Spoon, okay.
So the nerves, it's not allowing him to chew all the time, and so he has to go on more, we're trying to get him good nutrition, but still keep up softs and liquids. So they've been really good. He really wants raised planters for the back, so I would totally take Lowe's cards. He wants to garden, and so we're trying to get him some raised planters so that he can build a little garden on our back deck. So what else do we need?
Lemon scented.
I'm
gonna underline that because lavender does you no good.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I can't even wear perfume anymore. It's things you don't think about. I don't know.
Where do you guys grocery shop?
Well, we have 7 people, so we do a lot at BJ's.
BJ's, there you go.
BJ's.
I love BJ's too.
Yeah.
Well, that gives our audience, some at least a start, and those are, gosh, that list is pretty reasonable, and it's something that kind of makes us all think, about the different things we might ask for before this pandemic and before meeting you. This is the kind of stuff that will help keep this family together, ladies and gentlemen. So my last question for you, Caira, is I decided, and I'm glad you like the title of the webinar, recognizing your own strength. Of course, the play on the word recognition, because we're a recognition company. But you have everything that you need. I'm a big believer in that we're born with everything that we need to be successful in life. The trouble is either surrendering to it, whatever it is, or identifying it, or kind of clearing the space so that it comes to you. So not to get off on a tangent, but what I found great, and I think what we connected on is, our extreme faith, and that there's a higher power that's guiding a lot of this, so tell me, how do you get through, what, recognizing your own strength, what does that mean to you? How did you get there?
So, probably, and I've shared this with you, but I'll share it with the audience. We had a moment when I told you Eric was in a coma for 10 days. Mm-hmm. And they told us by day 4 that he wasn't going to make it. They told us they were going to wake him up the next day, and we had 3 kids at the time, bring in your 3 kids, let them say goodbye. And I remember we'd been married 3.5 years. And I remember saying, oh no, not enough. No. This was a lifetime gig. This was not, you don't get rid of me that easy. And yes, I built up an extreme faith. I can tell you that I prayed relentlessly that night. And he turned the corner that night, and no doctor could explain it. But part of the decision I made that night was that if we made it through, we were given a whole second chance. And you don't give up on a second chance. So, sorry.
You give me a lump on my throat. It's like the 3rd time we've cried together.
I know. I mean,
so ladies, go ahead.
Life is not easy. Mm-hmm. Life is hard. Mm-hmm. You can wallow in hard, and you can lay down and say, I don't want to get up. And you can say stuck in hard, or you can say, I am so much better and stronger than this. And I don't know how I'm going to make it through, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, because eventually I'll get through this hard, and it won't be so bad. And so we have a miraculous chance. And they told us we wouldn't have 2 more kids, and I have 2 more kids. We have a miraculous chance to spend every single joyous day with the people around us and the people we're connected to. Mm. And we don't ever look at that gift horse in our mouth, because the next few moments aren't guaranteed. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. And every day's a chance. And I mean, even with the kids, don't ever let it go unsaid, because I don't want to ever have that. I don't want to ever not say what I needed to say and not get the chance to. So how do you move on? One foot in front of the other, and you make every moment you're blessed with count. So, okay.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, did I tell you she was an inspiration, or did I tell you she was an inspiration? Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me,
Caira. And, I'm really going to take that advice to heart. We're all going through different things in our lives, different changes, some expected, some not expected. But I think you hit it, hard. You can't wallow in it. You just got to put, as you said, one foot in front of the other and move on, And I truly believe that if one door closes, there's a window that's going to open.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So that's what gets me through. And like I said, we're kindred spirits on that yeah. front. So if you guys want to contact Caira, all you have to do is, there we go. All you have to do is send your your letters or your cards or whatever you want to send, there's the address. And I'm going to collect all this stuff on behalf of Caira. And if you want to email Caira, just go ahead and email me at tommylee@rideau.com, and I'll be sure your message gets through to Caira. Thank you so much again. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, for inspiring us once again. And we'll be in touch. I don't think this will be the last webinar we do together. I had a great time. I know our audience is going to find value in this, especially in these challenging times we're in. You know, it kind of feels like we're pressing the reset button on the world, kind of, you know, and making us all kind of appreciate and take notice and value and recognize the things that are really important and the people that are important to us. So anything else, Caira, you want to share with the audience before we say goodbye?
Thanks for having me. Really.
Not a problem. Thank you, sister. We appreciate you, and we'll be in touch.
All right.
Take care.
You too.